So I was playing this game, Life is Strange, episodic series. Part 2 comes out on the 24th, and it's alright, but there was one teeny tiny minuscule part of it that got me thinking. It's this weird little thing I've noticed in a couple games lately, typically of the indie persuasion and mostly in the point-and-click, conversation simulator, telltale-like genre. At the very start of the game, a short message appears, a video game mission statement that briefly outlines the meta rules of the game, such as Telltale Games' The Walking Dead and similar series stating that the choices you make in the game will affect its outcome. It seems like a redundant statement. I mean, obviously your choices affect the outcome or there wouldn't be any, although The Walking Dead did get pretty shaky on that premise by the end. These mission statements barely registered at first, like I hadn't even read them and that it wouldn't matter either way. But as I look back on those games and start to see more and more of these messages crop up, they've become an increasingly interesting addition to me. Why did the developer feel the need to include them? On the surface, it feels like a sign of an incredible lack of respect towards the player, as though people won't consider their dialogue options carefully if they weren't explicitly told that they will be of consequence. It's especially peculiar to see it in games predicated almost entirely around dialogue choices, and by bold indie devs looking to craft new, totally unique narrative experiences. I can't imagine many people bought Life is Strange thinking that they were in for some white-knuckle action. A message at the start of the game telling me not to guff about with my decisions, in a game based solely around making decisions, isn't helpful or necessary. Mega Man doesn't start with a message saying, "This is a game about jumping and shooting. Any weapons you get from bosses can be used against later bosses." Well, the instruction manual for Mega Man probably has something to that effect in it, but these mission statements aren't instructions or tutorials, they're just peculiar little prefaces. Even Mass Effect, which features a lot of binary moral decisions, doesn't inform the player of their importance before you get to pick your class. Video games are a unique art form. They can offer total agency to the player in a manner wholly unique to games. Any sort of computer entertainment software could be classified as a video game, whether it involves rudimentary shapes in logical puzzles, character sprites abstracting a test of dexterity or strategy, or a narrative which the player themselves can influence, dictate, or create entirely from free resources. Sometimes you get a big mixture of styles, sometimes you get just one taken to the extreme. The point is, video games rely on the player to work. They simply will not function without human input, so that input should be cherished and treasured. Life is Strange, The Walking Dead, etc. offer a unique experience, the chance to influence the flow and direction of a story as it's being told. It's a great thing, an enjoyable thing, and one which I would like to revel in of my own accord, by my own hand. By prefacing such a game with a statement about how important my decisions will be, you take away from that. You pull back the curtain just enough to remind me that I'm clicking a mouse at my computer, choosing from one of two pre-loaded options, that you, the developer, are still not yet confident in the state of your game or the video games industry itself to present your story, your software, your art without additional comment, to let it truly speak for itself and for the player to experience it on their own, in their own way. This is a big part of why Dark Souls kicks so much ass. It's got tutorials, it's got instructions, it's got backstory, but the context of it all is left open for the player to discover on their own. And this is a game about stabbing people. You'd think a progressive, bright-eyed, French studio like Don't Nod Entertainment would want to reflect their game's passively anarchistic teenage snowflake ethos within the actual program, but nope. Big old message at the start saying, "Hey guys, this game you're about to play is all about player choice. You've got the choice, so make sure that you think real hard about what you say to this mean girl, because it's gonna come back to haunt you. Could be in episode 2, could be in episode 3, but those consequences are coming." Although if my choices do end up affecting the past, I will be very impressed. And then there's the likes of The Vanishing of Ethan Carter, which begins with a message informing the player that the game is a narrative experience that doesn't hold your hand. Which is true, I suppose. The game doesn't hold your hand when it comes to what you need to do, what order in which you do it, or even how you do it, but something just doesn't sit well with me about a narrative experience that doesn't hold your hand going out of its way to inform you that that will be the case. It leads me to believe that they weren't totally confident that players would figure out things on their own, that they would wander about aimlessly, expecting to be guided at some point, and then either giving up, looking up a strategy guide, or, worst of all, watching a Let's Play when guidance never came. As though they got the game thinking it was about stabbing people or something. They might think the game was broken or had glitched out, since even when things are running fine, there's a lot of walking around empty locations searching for something to interact with. As an aside, The Vanishing of Ethan Carter did actually glitch out for me at one point. I walked through a door, which, as scripted, closed behind me, but for some reason the game got stuck at that point and I was trapped in a closed-off area with no way out. I was lost for a fair while looking for some tiny detail that would grant me freedom before eventually realizing that this wasn't some super tough puzzle, but that the puzzle hadn't even loaded correctly. The game, which had so proudly and decisively told me that it wasn't going to hold my hand, became unplayable because I couldn't tell what was part of its design and what wasn't. I suppose that's the risk you run with these so-called walking simulators. If the conveyance isn't 100% perfect, then the entire experience can become unstuck, and sticking a mission statement at the beginning is no substitute. But is it not insulting to the player that a game feels the need to tell them that they won't hold their hand? When did it get to the point that your average video game player wasn't able to think for themselves? When did we require a point-blank, plain English explanation about what sort of game we've just started playing before we're even allowed to control our character? Hell, maybe we do need video game mission statements. Maybe a generation of coddling tutorials and cookie-cut tropes have dulled our collective senses, taken away our ability to understand the rules of a video game and adapt to them on our own terms. Maybe that's why Darkest Dungeon opens up with a blurb explaining that the game is hard, that things aren't always going to go your way, and that there is such a thing as a no-win scenario. Maybe gamers have gotten complacent, passive, weak. They couldn't even fathom the idea that they might have to abandon a mission because it's going badly, and so Darkest Dungeon has to tell them right as the game boots up. A strategy game has to tell the player to think strategically, or they won't, because gamers are all stupid babies. They expect a no-lose scenario. They want an audiobook to drone on in the background, a movie you press X to watch, a game that plays itself. They want all their choices to be made for them, highlighted blue for good, red for evil. Sorry, lost track of what I was talking about there. What was I talking about? Those little messages that pop up at the start of some indie games? God, what a minor thing to make a video on. They're nothing to be concerned about. Barely even worth reading, let alone mentioning. Just a safety net against the brainless fools who might bring down the Metacritic score if they get confused while playing. Cheeky chimps who want to feel smart and important, but only when the machine tells them it's okay. But then again, there are loads of artsy-fartsy indie games of similar ilk to the ones I talked about that don't have mission statements, and people seem to figure those out just fine. I guess it's still early doors for video games on the whole. Technology's advancing, capabilities are expanding, developers are still coming up with new and exciting experiences that can be had under the ever-broadening scope of video games. But, a personal request from me. No matter what crazy idea you come up with, let your game speak for itself. Video game mission statements are in the extreme minority, I know, but it rubs me the wrong way every time I see one. Get rid of them. They're stupid and lame, and they smell like you-know-what.
I know what it smells like.
Duty.
You tell 'em, Clem.